Recently, the world was shaken by the death of the Pope. The question many ask is, where does the Pope's soul go? This is a question that transcends religions, beliefs, and even time. I, who have spent most of my life trying to understand what happens after death, can offer you a different perspective, a perspective from someone who has traveled through the depths of darkness and has seen the light. My name is Aldo Moale. I'm 48 years old, and I come from Mombasa, a vibrant and historically rich city on the coast of Kenya. If you knew me before, you would know that my life was marked by practices that many consider obscure. I was a warlock, someone who dealt with the hidden forces of nature, seeking power, control, and of course answers to questions no one else dared to ask. But life has a way of teaching us the lessons we need to learn. I see everything I went through as a long path of transformation. Today, I find myself here, offering wisdom, perhaps not with the same fervor I had in the darkness, but with the serenity that comes from truth lived and understood. Today, I no longer seek to control the unknown, but to understand it. Stay until the end, and today you will better understand the power of this message. The death of such a great figure as the Pope makes us reflect on something that we all, sooner or later, must face. Where does the soul go? The answer is not simple nor direct, but comes from a deeper understanding of life and death. When I was on the other side, when I was still seeking answers in the darkness that the world did not provide, death was something to be feared, something to be challenged. We who dealt with hidden energies thought we could control even that death would be just another stage to dominate. But I learned, in the hardest way, that death is not something we can control. It is a profound mystery, a passage, but not the end of everything. I believe that a person's soul does not get lost with the death of the body. Look, in everyday life, we see how something invisible can affect us deeply. Love, for example, is something we cannot see, but it is undeniably real. Have you ever noticed how a simple gesture of affection can touch someone deep in their soul, and how its absence can tear the heart apart? I myself have lived this experience. When I was immersed in the darkness, I sought power that tried to control the forces around me, but I learned that true strength comes from the invisible, from what is not seen but felt. The Bible speaks to us about the soul, and many may look to the scriptures and find comfort. A verse that comes to mind is Matthew 16:26. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his soul? Do you see? What defines us is not the body, nor the wealth or power we possess while alive. What defines us is our soul, the essence of our being, that which remains when everything else is gone. And the Pope, his life was marked by humility and dedication to something greater than himself. His soul, in my view, was not lost, but embraced by something greater, by a realm where the choices made throughout life define the quality of our passage. I'm not here to say exactly where anyone's soul goes, but one thing I can affirm: it goes to the place it prepared for during its life, like a field which is cultivated with effort and where we reap what we sow. The big question that arises after the death of such an influential person is, what happens to the soul? Many say that the soul goes to heaven, others claim it goes to hell, and still others believe that the soul gets lost, wandering aimlessly for a while. But if we have learned anything throughout our lives, it is that the truth, like life, is never that simple. There are no absolute answers, but there are principles that guide us. In the time I was involved with the forces seeking to control the soul, all I knew about the soul's final destiny was based on fear and the desire for power. I remembered the rituals, the manipulation of energies, the desire to control not only the body, but the destiny of the spirit. However, over the course of my journey, I discovered that no one, not even the most powerful, can control the soul. No matter how much we try, the soul, in its essence, belongs to the beyond. And what we do during our life, the actions we take, the choices we make, are the seeds we plant for what is to come. It is not a punishment or a divine reward, but a reflection of what we are, of what we carry in our hearts. Like the seasons of the year, which have their changes and cycles, the soul follows its own path on a journey of learning and evolution. Look, for many, death is a great uncertainty. Many fear what comes next, but I tell you, it is what we do before that matters. The Pope, with his life dedicated to serving others, to humility, to seeking peace, planted good seeds in his path. We are not talking about a perfect man, but a man who, throughout his life, sought to transcend the limitations of the ego, always seeking the common good, helping others. The soul of this man is not a lost soul, but a soul that is preparing to rise. I know that many think that for the soul to have a glorious destiny, it must be free of mistakes. But true beauty lies in the pursuit, in the attempt to do good and be better each day. This, more than any ritual or sacrifice, is what elevates us. The Pope, in his last years, showed us that the soul purifies itself not through perfection, but through intention. He taught us that life should be lived with compassion, with an open heart to others, always in search of the light. The idea that the soul goes to a specific place after death is a conception we have because of our human desire to understand and control the incomprehensible. But the soul is not a simple entity that follows a straight line. It is part of something much greater, an eternal cycle of learning and evolution. I have seen many souls over the years, and I can tell you with certainty, the soul is not limited to a single destination. It is fluid, like the wind that goes and comes, and like water, which adapts and transforms over time. In my experience, I had the opportunity to look beyond the veil of death and realize that the soul, contrary to what many think, does not disappear, but continues to move, always seeking growth, understanding, and ultimately, peace. This journey is not something that is resolved in a single moment, but is built throughout our lives. The choices we make, the loves we give, the pains we face, all of this shapes the path of the soul. Death, instead of being an end, is just a transition. If I looked at the rituals I practiced in the past, where everything seemed to be about domination and control, I would realize that true power was not in the manipulation of spiritual forces, but in understanding them. When we understand that we are part of something greater, we can see the world with new eyes. The soul of the Pope, for example, was marked by his devotion, his unwavering faith, and his acts of compassion. Even those who disagree with his ideologies cannot deny the depth of his dedication to others. And this, my friends, is what defines the destiny of a soul. It is not the words we speak nor the positions we hold, but the sincerity of our actions, the integrity of our essence. He lived for humanity, and that is a choice that perpetuates his soul for all eternity. If you ask me what happens to the soul of someone who lives with a pure heart, like the Pope, I would say that it unites with a greater energy, something that transcends our understanding. It is not just about what goes somewhere, but about what is transformed in the journey. The soul rises, connects with the divine, and this connection is not fleeting but eternal. When I was on the other side, before my transformation, I thought I understood the forces that govern the spiritual world. I used rituals, invoked energies, and believed I could manipulate the soul, dominate the invisible. The idea of controlling the destiny of people, their lives and their souls, seemed possible. I was immersed in a practice that promised power, but deep down, what it gave me was illusion. I remember the ceremonies, the words whispered in ancient tongues, the feeling of touching something greater, stronger, but at the same time, emptier. When I invoked spiritual forces, I felt in control. The sensation of having power over the invisible was seductive, but there was always something wrong, something that didn't fit. The promises of control I saw in those rituals were nothing more than a mask for fear and insecurity. I wanted more power, more dominion, but I could never fill the inner void I felt. Now looking back, I see that all of it was just an attempt to escape the true understanding of the soul. What I didn't know, what I didn't understand, was that true power is not in controlling the forces around us, but in learning to surrender to them, in understanding the natural flow of the universe. True spiritual strength does not require domination. It requires humility, understanding, and above all, respect for the divine laws that govern us. The soul is not something that can be manipulated. It does not belong to us. It does not belong to this body or this life. We are merely its temporary guardians, taking care of it while we are here. And while I tried to control the souls of others, I was ignoring my own journey. Over the years, I realized that true spiritual evolution does not come from power over others, but from control over ourselves, over our desires, our passions, and especially over our ego. Now, looking at the life of someone like the Pope, I see a fundamental difference. His soul was not controlled by rituals or invocations. It was not the power of sacred words or mystical gestures that guided his life. His soul was guided by faith, by compassion, by connection with the divine. He understood something I didn't comprehend, that true spiritual connection is not in manipulating forces, but in allowing the soul to be shaped by the light of God, by goodness, by the purity of the heart. I now see that death is not an end, but a transition. The Pope, with his life of service and dedication to others, did not need rituals to reach his destination. He was not trying to control his destiny. He was following it. And that, my friends, is what helps us understand the true journey of the soul. I would like to share something that has always come to my mind when I think about the destiny of the soul, especially after the death of great figures like the Pope. Many people question, and rightly so, where the soul goes after death. There is a biblical quote that marked me deeply, and that I believe can bring a profound understanding of this question. In John 14:6, Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." This passage is powerful because it speaks to us about the path to the eternal, the path of the soul. It is not about rituals or grand deeds we may perform during our lives. What defines the destiny of the soul is our relationship with truth, with love, with compassion. The Pope, during his life, did not seek paths of power or control, as many might imagine a figure in his position should do. No, he followed the path of humility, of surrender to the service of others, of true faith. And here, biblical wisdom is clear. The way to the Father is not through our own means, but through the truth and life that Christ offers us. I remember that while I was lost in the practices of control and manipulation of spiritual forces, I did not see this clearly. The truth was always there, but my vision was clouded by my incessant quest for power. Now, looking at the life of someone like the Pope, I see that he understood this. The soul of a person who lives according to God's truth, who surrenders to their mission with true faith, does not get lost, but finds the way to eternal peace. Death, for those who live according to this truth, is not an end, but a transition to something greater. The Bible also reminds us in Philippians 3:20, "But our citizenship is in heaven, from which we also eagerly await the Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ." This reminds us that even though our journey on earth is limited, our soul belongs to heaven, and our true home is the kingdom of God. And it is in this kingdom that the Pope's soul now finds itself, not by his own merits, but by his dedication to the love and truth of Christ. Have you ever stopped to think about what happens when someone passes away? I'm not talking about the simplistic ideas that comfort us, but about what truly happens to the soul, to what we are beyond the body. This is not something we can measure with words or reach through pure logic. Death, the transition to the other side, is an experience that escapes our human comprehension. But still, there are signs. There are truths that we can perceive throughout our lives. For example, when someone lives with a pure heart, without deceit, without seeking only power or fame, we see something different. We see light. It is not a light that shines for everyone, but that illuminates the way of that person's own heart. And this, my friends, is what the Pope showed us, even without words. His life was a constant search for truth, for justice, for peace. Now imagine for a moment the following. You are walking toward a great door, a door that, when opened, leads to something you cannot see, but feel deeply. It is not a door you can control. It is not something that is solved with wealth or power. It is something that is governed by the essence of who you were, by what you did with your life, with your soul. The death of the Pope is a reminder of this. We are not talking about someone who simply reached the end of their physical life, but about someone who fulfilled their mission. And when the mission is fulfilled with truth and love, there is nothing to fear. There is a clear path. The Pope, with all his actions, was not seeking to immortalize himself, he was seeking to guide. He sought to live according to the truth of Christ, and this truth is the light that leads the soul to where it should be. I know many of us are afraid of the unknown. Death brings with it this feeling of mystery that no one can really describe. But when reflecting on this, I can tell you one thing. True life is not in what you accumulate, but in what you give. And the Pope gave much more than he could receive. He gave his life to the service of others, and that without a doubt was what shaped the destiny of his soul. When we think of great figures throughout history, we often remember leaders, those who held positions of power and influence. But what truly defines a great figure is not the position they held, nor the title they carried, but the impact they left on the lives of those around them. And the Pope, with his life dedicated to serving others, was undoubtedly one of these great figures. His soul did not seek fame or adulation. He sought truth and peace. His journey was not marked by the desire for power, but by the constant surrender to love and compassion. The Pope showed us the true meaning of leadership. It is not about controlling others, but about serving others. And when you live according to this truth, your soul becomes a light to the world. He was not perfect, as none of us are, but his soul was moved by a genuine desire to do good, and that is what shapes the destiny of a soul. It is not the pursuit of recognition, but the dedication to others. When we live to serve, when we seek harmony, peace, healing, our soul begins to reflect these virtues, and it is this reflection that guides us to the destiny that truly matters. Now, you may wonder, how is the soul of such a great person treated after death? And the answer, although not simple, is that the soul of such a noble figure, someone who lived for the good of others, finds its path to elevation. It is not a soul that gets lost, but a soul that transforms, that transcends physical death and becomes part of something much greater, much more eternal. I see the Pope's soul as an example of how we should live our own lives. He was a light in the midst of the world's darkness, and this light does not go out. When you live with truth and love, your soul becomes part of something that goes beyond this life. It connects with the divine and finds its place in eternity. One thing that many don't realize is that while we are alive, our soul is in constant transformation. We are not bound to a fixed condition, but are shaped by each experience, by each decision we make. The soul is like a field, which can be cultivated with seeds of kindness, compassion, and wisdom, or can be neglected and left to get lost in indifference and selfishness. The Pope, throughout his life, cultivated this soul with dedication. He knew that what really matters is not how much we accumulate, but how we touch the lives of those around us. Every gesture of compassion, every word of comfort, every action aimed at the well-being of others is a seed that is planted in the soul, and that seed will germinate in ways we may not even imagine. Look, we are often quick to judge what is right or wrong, what is worthy or unworthy, but true transformation comes from what we do in silence, away from the cameras, away from applause. The Pope did not live his life to be exalted, he lived to serve, and that is the true measure of the soul that serves, the soul that seeks peace. This soul cannot be lost, because it is guided by something much greater than any earthly ambition. Now, when talking about the destiny of the Pope's soul, I am not suggesting that he was saved by his deeds, but by his sincere dedication to truth, love, and the light of Christ. The Bible tells us in Ephesians 2:8, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not of yourselves, it is the gift of God." This reminds us that our journey does not depend on our works, but on divine grace. And those who live according to that grace, with a pure heart dedicated to the good, will see their soul not only welcomed, but elevated to something eternal. This is the understanding I now have. When we try to control everything around us, when we seek power and glory, we move away from the true essence of the soul. But when we live in humility, in service, as the Pope did, we find the true path to eternity. The truth is that the soul lives to follow the purposes of God. Every day, life tests us, challenges us, to see if we are true and faithful to the paths He has set for us. The journey is not easy. It will not always be smooth, but it is in this daily test that our soul finds its true purpose. Every challenge, every difficulty is an opportunity to strengthen our faith and trust in God. The life of the Pope was not easy. He faced immense adversities, trials that many of us could never imagine. But even in the face of difficulties, he remained firm in his purpose, always faithful to what God had asked of him. He showed us that despite struggles and suffering, the path of faith is the only one that leads us to true peace. So, what should we learn from his life? It's not about a life without difficulties, but rather a life lived with purpose. The Pope lived to serve others, and in doing so, he followed divine purposes. We too must question ourselves every day. Are we living to fulfill God's will? Are we being true and faithful? The soul that dedicates itself to this purpose, that always seeks God's will find its place in eternity. To conclude, I invite you to join us on this journey if you too are seeking answers to profound questions of life and powerful teachings. Subscribe now, activate notifications, and come walk with us in search of wisdom and transformation. No matter where you are in your journey, you are not alone. We are all learning, growing, and seeking the truth. Join us, and let's continue to explore together what life truly has to offer.